and welcome to another episode of PDA Dad UK, coming to you this week from my garden. We're in the middle of some holidays and everyone's in the home, and it's a bit difficult to get time to just do this aside, so I figure I'm going to get in the garden and just do it in the beautiful surroundings around here. It's my go-to place to have some me time, if you like. In this episode, I want to look at the issue of dealing with our kids having difficult or challenging behaviours when out of the home. So when we're out and about, and I'm going to come at it from a couple of different angles. I'm going to tell two stories of two very different situations I was presented with and how they both affected me very differently. First is a story I've told on previous episodes, which was we were at a local supermarket called Asda, and we were in Asda and we were there specifically to get my daughter some new school shoes. And it's always a challenge with sensory issues anyway, but you combine them with PDA, pathological demand avoidance, and it becomes a very, very difficult thing indeed. You've got to get the right shoes that fit and that feel right. But if she's got it into her head that she wants a certain thing, then it's very hard to dissuade from that, regardless of how much it needs to be. She wanted a pair of shoes that were 2 sizes too big, and we were, no, you're not a size 4 yet, you're a size 2, and they're not gonna work. And it was a sort of repeated, well, why don't we try the 2s and see how they fit? And then it basically just escalated, and she just had an absolute full meltdown in the middle of this supermarket, picked up the shoes, threw them across the supermarket, and started getting really aggressive and really destructive, to the point that I had to move in, do a restraint, and maneuver her outside of the shop. And it was a horrible feeling, because you're in public and everyone can see what's going on, and you get a lot of raised eyebrows. When I got her out to the car, a chap came up to me and he said, what's going on here? What are you doing to that poor child? And I was left in the situation. I had to explain, look, I really appreciate that you've got the courage to come up and do something about it because you feel that you're seeing something wrong. The reality is my daughter has a form of autism. She's just had a full meltdown, and I had to keep her safe, move her out of the supermarket and get her into a safe place where she wasn't going to be able to do any damage to herself or anything else. And it was a very awkward thing, but I think the worst part of it for me was just the faces of other people. You get the people who are just looking, watching, the looks of shock, or a combination of, if that was my child, combined with, what is that guy doing? Why is she acting like that? A whole load of different questions and annoyances that crop up, and you just feel about yay big. And it was one of those things that affected me for days. You sort of afterwards thinking about all the things you could have maybe done differently, or what are those people thinking? Is someone going to pick up the phone and put in a complaint because they're worried that I was doing something incorrectly? You worry about a lot of things. I want to compare that to a situation we had at a soft play, and we'd been there for an hour or so, and my daughter clicked into the behaviours that usually lead to a meltdown. So we knew probably time to wrap it up, or at least get her out into the outside for a bit and change the environment. And I'd had a parent come up to me and said, your daughter was swearing at my kids, what's going on? So I had to go through the same routine, explain what was going on. Look, my daughter's autistic. She has issues with regulating her emotions, and as a result of that we get these situations, and I really do apologise. I made my daughter go up and apologise to the family. I find that really helps. It's one of those things that reinforces to her that this isn't something we can do, but also shows that to other parents and other people, this is something we are taking seriously. And whilst my daughter has these issues, it's not something that I'm expecting you to have to just live with because I have to live with it. It's a delicate balancing act, if you like. And I then took my daughter outside, and she was having a run around in the outside area where there was no other kids around there, and she was just decompressing, having a bit of a calm down, if you like. And a lady specifically came up to me and said, look, I just wanted to say you're doing an incredible job. I saw how you handled that and what you did and what was going on, and I just think you're doing a remarkable job. Well done, you. And the contrast between those two situations, two things that happened not too far apart from each other, but the difference between the judging looks of people and somebody who came up and just said, you're doing a good job, made a real difference. And it's something that's come into play in the home life recently as well. One of my neighbours is a teaching assistant, and she's been learning about autism and specifically PDA and pathological demand avoidance and how that's working. And it was during the middle of lockdown, and we'd had some real stresses and some real, challenging behaviours presented, a lot of screaming, swearing, and you think, what do people think of us? What's going on in people's heads? And I'd just taken the moment to apologise over the fence and say, look, I'm really sorry, it's been a bit of a difficult time. She goes, no, I actually really understand. I've been part of being in my job, I've been looking at autism and specifically pathological demand avoidance, and I'm really coming to understand what you guys go through on a daily basis. And again, the difference between all those fears and the concerns of being judged and all that kind of stuff, it really just dissipated. And she acknowledged, now I've just got to convince my husband that she's not just a naughty child. And I totally get that, and it's difficult. But these are things we go through, and in fact it's identified by a lot of parents of autistic kids that those situations and the judgment or fear of judgment from others has a dramatic impact on life and how we carry ourselves, what our fears are, and it affects our mental health. It's one of those things that when you feel anxious about something, I can only speak for myself, I guess, but it's a common thing, I believe. When you're in that anxious stage, it just resonates in your head. You go through it over and over and over, and it churns around and around and around, and you can't sleep at night because you're worried about, what was this? What could I have done differently? You replay these things in your head to try and come up with a better way of having dealt with it, or whatever the case may be. So I want to have a closer look at this is a topic. I want to look at it from our perspective as parents, but also from the perspective of if you're an onlooker and you see something like this taking place, you see a child in meltdown or behaving in a way that you might think twice about, to actually be able to stop and think and actually process what's going on and how you can be constructive. So to start with, I want to look at it from the perspective of being a parent and going through this situation when out in public. For myself, I'm quite gregarious, I'm quite outgoing, and I can pretty much talk to anyone comfortably. That's not the case for everyone, but for myself, what I found really does help is when my daughter's presenting these behaviours, when there's challenging behaviours going on, if she's acting out, if she's being aggressive, or if she's, there have been situations where she's hit other kids, where she certainly swears a lot at them. What do you do in those situations? For me, I've become very open about talking about my daughter's condition. And the reason for that is that I find when you engage people in what really is going on, they actually, I would say 99% of the time, people are actually really understanding to it. So I talked about that situation in the soft play where my daughter kicked off and she was swearing at some other kids. By being able to go up to those parents and say, look, I'm really sorry this happened. My daughter's autistic, she has trouble processing her emotions, and that can lead to some quite challenging behaviours. She also has what's called pathological demand avoidance, where telling her not to do something seems to inspire her to do it more and more and more, trying to explain it in a way that the average everyday person can understand without getting into the real semantics of it. And I find that really helps when people actually take the time to listen and understand what autism is about. And I find 99% of the time people will actually say, oh, my cousin's got a child who's autistic, or my niece is autistic, my nephew is autistic, my best friend's budgerigar was purchased for a person who had an autistic child. It goes on and on and on. There's just so many examples of people who they can actually then relate it. And by being able to relate it, they get an understanding of, okay, there's more to this picture. And I would say so many times I've seen people really take the opportunity to say, oh, that's okay, no worries, I completely understand. And it completely dissolves the situation, it diffuses it. I had one situation, probably about 12 months ago now, where it was another soft play, and we'd had this situation and we resolved it, and the lady was really understanding. I think she was actually looking to start working with autistic kids, so she'd taken an interest. And on her way out, she actually brought her kids over to say goodbye to my daughter and my son. And she just said, I really want them to understand that this is what happens, this is what some kids have to go through. Be understanding of other people. And we live in a society that talks a lot about tolerance. We see it a lot in a lot of different ways. There's been so much headway in so many areas of acceptance and understanding to so many different types of people with different beliefs and lifestyles and whatever the case may be. And it's one of those things that because we've got that as a society at the moment, it does make a difference when you can actually talk to someone and say, this is what's going on. They want to put themselves in a position to be understanding and supportive most of the time. You're always going to get that one, I call them cockwombles, those people that just refuse to accept it, and it's just an offence. In fact, funnily enough, we had a situation many years ago now. It was in the early days of dealing with all this. And we'd been part of a local group that had just parents of children with a variety of different disabilities. We'd bumped into one of the parents at this thing, and this soft play, and the kids were there, and something happened between the kids, and I can't even remember what it was. But she was furious, and she came up and she was really haranguing particularly my wife at the time, because they were the ones who knew each other. And it struck me that of all the people you'd think would actually step back and understand, this was the one woman that just refused to. And it really, it took my breath away. She stormed out, she wouldn't listen to a word we had to say, and that was that. And we were all sort of left like, whoa, where'd that come from? Because it hadn't even been a particularly dramatic behavioural problem. It was, elevated from what everyday situations would be, but certainly not to the level of her misunderstanding and her response. You're always going to get those people every now and again who just don't get it, and you kind of got to be able to say, well, you don't get it, that's cool, you can't let it affect you in that way. But 99% of the time, people are really understanding and really make an effort to understand. For people who aren't maybe as gregarious and outgoing as myself and able to just sort of talk to anyone about pretty much anything, there are still things you can do. One of the big things at the moment, which has been pushed by a number of supermarkets, is the sunflower lanyards. And these are just a little green lanyard with sunflowers dotted on them. The idea is it's meant to indicate hidden disability. It's not the best system in the world yet, because anyone can go and pick one of these up. My daughter has one, not because we wanted her to necessarily have one, but she took a fancy to them and wanted to have one. She understood what it was about. She's at a special educational needs school, and they talked about them there. And these things are free from most supermarkets. You can go and ask for them. And they are a good way, especially at airports and things like that, when airport staff, I believe, have been trained to recognise them now. So if they see some of the sunflower lanyard, they'll actually make a accommodations, and in fact they'll hand them out themselves to, if you go up and announce that, I have a special needs child, they'll provide them so that there's extra support for you as you get on the plane and so forth. Just having something like that can show, if somebody recognises what that lanyard represents, then there can be an understanding that's brought into it. Some people go down the routes of t-shirts and things like that. For me, that's not necessarily a way to go for my family. I'm not judging anybody who does it. The idea that, you might have something that announces that my child's autistic on a t-shirt or however, can make a big difference, because there's obviously going to be a recognition from anyone who sees what's going on. That child has autism. I sometimes worry about that level of labelling, but that's a whole another issue to go into. You've got to find what works for you and your family and works for you to be able to get through those processes and those moments where you're outside of the house and that situation is going to occur, and how do you deal with it at that moment. I've learnt to dissect the day in a lot of ways as well. And this was a big thing. Somebody commented to me the other day that it feels like the whole day is ruined. Out it goes. You've had a great day, then you have a colossal meltdown, things are thrown, people are hit, swear words, and something about PDA really does, they know where to hit hit you right in the heart with some of the words and the things they call you. Certainly for my daughter, I've learnt to some degree compartmentalise the day, and it's a really hard thing to do, and I still struggle with it. But being able to go, well, that was that moment and I've moved on, is a big thing. You can't judge a whole day by one moment, just by the same way that you can't judge an entire concert because they made a mistake in one song. Doesn't make the rest of the concert rubbish. It means that they had a bad moment in one song. It's the same application in the home and out and about, because they've had one situation, regardless of how embarrassing it was or how difficult it was to deal with. It doesn't write the rest of the day off, and you can put a block on it and move on afterwards once there's been that calming time. It's a really important thing to be able to do. It's not easy, as I say, and I still struggle. We had a situation this morning where my daughter got aggressive with my son, and I had to step in. And I feel it for the rest of the day, but there's a point you've got to be able to block it off so that it doesn't reflect to the kids, and we just move on with the rest of the day. And I'll come out and have a puff and a cider and chill out of the evening and try and just move on from it and decompress and debrief. The other side of it is if you're somebody who's out and about and you see a family struggling, you see a mother or a father or both who've got a kid that's kicking off, and I was the worst offender for it probably before I had my own daughter with these issues. In fact, I had some friends back in Australia who had an autistic son, and I used to think, they make a lot of excuses, don't they? And to my shame now, I look back and wish I could go back with my knowledge now and say, hey, what can I do? And that's the key. It's been identified in research that the biggest thing that you can do as somebody when you witness these things is just, is there anything I can do to help? You're doing an amazing job. Are you okay? Something that's supportive, that's vocalised, that's demonstrated, makes a massive difference to a person who's having to deal with this, because it takes you away from that fear of what everyone else is thinking. If you can't do that, move on, don't stare. It's a bit like passing a car crash. You get the old crane neck of everyone trying to look over and, is there blood? Don't be that person. Just move along, go about your business and let them deal with what they've got to deal with, which is going to be challenging enough. But if you're the kind of person that can actually reach out and say, hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? It can make a massive, massive difference to somebody's experience of that situation and how they get on with the rest of their day, week, month, life. It's those little things you hang on to. When somebody's shown a bit of support, you carry it with you. And it's a great way to show some solidarity and some support and some compassion. The other thing you can do is, if you've got your kids with you and you're seeing it, is maybe not at that moment, it would be a bad time to do it, but when you get home, when you get to a time where, you know, that's not happening, being able to explain, well, you know, you saw that today. This is what was likely going on, you know. Some kids have extra things they have to deal with. Their brains work differently. And I have to explain this to my son. It's something I explain relatively regularly because I want it to sink in and I want it to be something that he understands. My daughter's brain works differently to the ways his and mine do. We don't have her anxiety and her levels of frustration that she has to deal with. By being able to take a step back and going, okay, we know that Sienna operates differently to the way you and I do. And we have to make allowances for that and accept that. And we can't judge her for that. And it's difficult for him to be able to accept that. I mean, he's a lot younger than her, and he certainly cops the brunt of a lot of her more challenging behaviours. But it's developing him into a really understanding little man. And in fact, when his school report came back, one of the comments they made was that he's always there to support his friends, and if someone's upset, he's the first in to go, hey, you okay? You know, you're all right. And I love that. I love that he's been able to take these situations on a subconscious level, but through, you know, the way we talk to him and the way that he sees things, he's come to understand that everybody's different and everybody has their own challenges, and the best thing he can do for anyone is to walk up and, hey, you okay? Can I help? And he, you know, he's five in a couple of days' time. He gets that already, and if that's something he takes forward with him, then that's something that I'm going to be very proud that he's been able to learn from these experiences. That's all I really wanted to say on it. So please do comment on this. I'd love to know of any experiences you may have had if you've been out and about and you've either experienced this with your own child, or if you've been out and about and you've seen it happen. What are the things that you wish people would have done for you at that time? What was the struggle that you faced with it? And if you're somebody who was witnessing it, what do you feel you could have maybe done differently? Or what did you do that really helped and supported that person through that? Please do like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.